Update on the case of Stacey Lyn Chahorski, previously known as the Rising Fawn Doe. This is a case I just covered. The person who took Stacey Lyn Chahorski's life wasn't known yet at the time of the first coverage. Genetic genealogy and the GBI, which is the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, has identified that the man who took her life was Henry Frederick Wise, who is also known as Hoss Wise. Wise was 34 at the time, and Stacey was just 19. She had called her mother in 1988 to tell her she was going to hitch rides from where she was in North Carolina back home to Michigan. Stacey was found in Rising Fawn, Georgia. If you're interested in Stacey's identification, that video will play at the end of this update. Stacey was officially reported missing in January of 1989, 4 months after she had called her mother. She had actually already been found by then along the highway in Dade County, Georgia. She'd been subject to SA and had been asphyxiated. She was then discarded as if she didn't matter. She would be identified in March of 2022 after 33 years. Hoss Wise was 34 in 1988 when he likely picked Stacey up hitchhiking home. He was working as a truck driver, traveling along the route for Western Carolina Trucking Company. That makes me wonder if he's responsible for more cases along this route. Way too often, these serial offenders were truck drivers. His route took him through Chattanooga to Birmingham and then on to Nashville. He had a criminal history that stretched through Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina. The charges went from theft and assault to obstructing a police officer. Wise met his own fate in a disturbing way, so perhaps karma's real. He died in a fiery car accident at Myrtle Beach Speedway in South Carolina in 1999. I dug until I found an article from that time, and it appears he'd gotten a car from a salvage yard. While it was a cheap choice for racing, it wasn't safe. For whatever reason that day, he chose not to wear a fire retardant suit. So when the car stalled and caught on fire, he was unable to escape. While he perished in a way that could be considered fitting, he still lived to age 44, which is 25 years more than he allowed Stacey. He had a number of felony arrests, and they had his DNA because DNA was mandatory for him. What bothers me, and I'd like to know how you feel about it, is that they had his DNA all along as being the perpetrator. They just didn't test it. They waited to test the DNA of her assailant until after they had her name. I do not remotely see how it matters. Maybe it makes the investigation portion of it easier, but they could have identified him all along, and perhaps he did this to other women. Instead, they didn't bother to test it until he was no longer alive. Joe Montgomery, a special agent with the FBI, said to the press, "The biggest problem in being able to solve this case is we had no identity of the victim, so we had no starting point. But we know in other cases they've done the DNA and the perpetrator ends up in prison. And what good did waiting go anyway? He didn't know Stacey Lyn Chahorski. He just picked her up. It's clear she was hitchhiking, and I just wonder how many women he did this to. If he got away with it once, what are the odds that was the only time? It's possible his DNA is sitting in other cases they also have not processed. If Stacey'd been allowed to live her life, she'd be 52 today. Henry Wise got to live for 44 years, 10 years more than Stacey got from the day they met. The Rising Fawn Doe, identified as Stacey Chahorski. Stacey's family hasn't said a lot about Stacey's life or circumstances, but we know the 19-year-old young woman was officially reported missing in January of 1989, which was 4 months after she had last contacted her family or friends. We've discussed in this channel before whether or not people hitchhiked in the 1980s. It seems very much from the answers that it varied from state to state, with most responders expressing doubt by the late 80s and early 90s that people were still traveling this way. So it brings into question who, in January of 1989, was also picking up hitchhikers. It used to be far more normalized, and more people would stop and pick them up, which I imagine made it a lot safer. By 1989, I'm not sure that's the case. In this case, Stacey planned to hitchhike from North Carolina to her home in Michigan. The goal in the end was arriving to Flint, Michigan. Unbeknownst to those who know her, in December of 1988, the Dade County Sheriff's Office and the Georgia Bureau of Investigations found themselves responding to a scene of a body located about 5 miles from the Alabama state line on I-59 in the northbound lane near Rising Fawn in Dade County, Georgia. The body belonged to an unidentified female homicide victim. There is no reporting of how long they believe she'd been there, but by December she'd been unheard from for 3 months. She'd been assaulted by a man and eventually strangled. Stacey was found wearing navy blue thermal knit long-sleeve pullover shirt, Calvin Klein jeans, black shoes, a gold chain, and a white heart-shaped ring. As usual with these cases, it wasn't enough to go on, but it didn't stop the GBI from trying. They went on and had a forensic artist make some clay renderings and hoped the new composites would recreate what she might look like. However, I have to comment on one of the sets of recreations, and I'd love it if you take a minute to comment on what you think. My daughter saw the set here and made a comment about how they don't look like a person, but rather what Ron Weasley's sister would look like, as imagined by J.K. Rowling. Which is terrible, but it's also, in my opinion, and just mine, that it's also very insulting to Stacey. I can't help but think my daughter's not wrong, and it feels like a pretty insulting depiction to me, but maybe they did their best, I don't know, but let me know what you think. I realize that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but there are times when it feels like they greatly exaggerate any flaws in the worst way. This feels to me like 10 steps past that statement. It's just sad because it's an opportunity. Although in this case, Stacey was pretty far away, so it's unlikely her parents or anyone where she was would even see the depiction. Later on, there would be better depictions done. Larry Dwayne Hall was named as a suspect in this case, according to one news article from Radford University. Hall is speculated to be responsible for the disappearance of up to 45 women during the 1980s and the 1990s. Eventually, the GBI began looking into and taking advantage of new DNA technology, with the hopes that this might lead to the identity by building a family tree. In this case, it's Othram Labs that we have to thank for this identification. It was with this that led to the final confirmation in March of 2022, confirming that the Rising Fawn Jane Doe was in fact Stacey. Stacey went unidentified for 33 years. Had she lived, she would be 52 today. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please consider subscribing and hitting the bell so you don't miss new episodes. So if you enjoy the content here and you're not sure, take a peek to see if you're subscribed. Take care of yourselves and each other.